You probably think of yourself as someone who doesn't hide. You show up, you respond, you participate in conversations and meetings and dinners, but there's a version of you that almost never appears in any of those spaces. Not the version that performs competence, not the one that keeps things light, the one that actually notices things other people walk past without blinking, the one that cares about something with a kind of intensity that feels almost embarrassing to admit out loud, the one that has a particular way of thinking through a problem that doesn't quite match how everyone else in the room is doing it. You felt that version trying to surface sometimes, and almost without thinking, you've redirected it, changed the subject, laughed it off, dialed it back. Not because someone told you to, but because something in you decided it wasn't safe to let it land. This is one of the stranger patterns in human behavior. Not hiding weakness, not hiding failure, not hiding the parts of yourself you're ashamed of, hiding the parts that are actually good. The instinct that catches what others miss. The warmth that goes deeper than most people let warmth go. The creativity that works differently. The way you hold silence in a room without making it awkward. These things stay inside, compressed, carefully kept out of view. And most of the time, you don't even notice you're doing it. You'll be in a conversation and you'll have a thought, a genuinely good one, and you'll start to say it. Then something catches, a small hesitation, a quick internal reading of the room, and the thought gets softened, shortened, wrapped in a disclaimer before it ever fully arrives. I don't know, maybe this is obvious, and then the actually interesting part. Or it never comes out at all. You just nod. You move on. You file it somewhere internal. Later, someone else says almost exactly what you were thinking, and they say it plainly, without apology. And you watch the room respond to it, and you feel something that isn't quite jealousy, more like a quiet recognition of what you just did to yourself. This happens more than you've tracked. In group settings, you tend to wait. You read the dynamic first. You want to know if this is a space where the thing you're about to say will actually be received. And often enough, you decide it won't be. Or you're not sure. And not sure feels the same as no. So you hold back. At work, you do slightly less than you're capable of. Not because you're lazy. Because the last time you brought something fully formed and genuinely yours, the response was flatter than you expected. So now you bring things half done. You keep a little in reserve. That way, if it doesn't land, there's a buffer. It wasn't really your best. You were just testing. In relationships, you let people know you a layer or two in. But not all the way. Not the part that thinks about things too much at 2 a.m. Not the interest that would take 20 minutes to explain and might get a blank look halfway through. Not the version of you that cares about the small, specific things with disproportionate feeling. You protect that. And you call it not being too much. You call it reading the room. You call it being appropriate. You call it knowing your audience. And some of that is real. Social adaptation is a thing that exists. Not every version of you belongs in every room. But at some point, the habit stops being context appropriate and starts being the default. And the default becomes, reduce yourself before anyone else has a chance to. Here is where the mechanism underneath gets interesting. Because this isn't about low self-worth in the obvious way. You don't walk around thinking you're worthless. You might even suspect, privately, that some of what you carry is actually good. But there's a different belief running underneath that. Something quieter and more specific. The belief that what's good in you is also what makes you vulnerable. That the thing you do well, the way you see, the way you feel, the way you engage, is also the thing that could get rejected most completely. Ordinary, you can survive a cold response. But the real version of you, the specific and genuine one, that rejection would mean something different. So the logic, somewhere below conscious thought, becomes, don't risk it. Keep the best parts behind glass. Let people see enough to function, not enough to matter. And the cost of that logic doesn't show up dramatically. It doesn't arrive as a breakdown or a crisis or a moment you can point to clearly. It arrives as a slow flatness, a sense that most interactions are slightly less than they could be. You finish conversations and feel fine, but not full. You spend time with people who like you, the version of you they've been given access to. And somewhere in that, there's a loneliness that's hard to explain, because on paper, you are not isolated. You have people, you have routines, you have enough, but the specific part of you that would make connection feel real, that part didn't show up. You kept it home. And now you're wondering why the room feels a little empty even when it's full. There's also what it does to your work, your output, the things you make or say or contribute. When you consistently hold your actual capability in reserve, you stop developing it properly. You get good at performing a slightly lesser version of yourself. And after a while, you're not entirely sure where the performance ends and where you actually begin. That's not a poetic exaggeration. That's a functional consequence. Identity gets genuinely blurry when you've been editing yourself for long enough. You start to reach for the real thing and find the habit instead. Now here's the part that tends to get misread. Most people, when they recognize this pattern in themselves, frame it as a confidence problem. They tell themselves, if I just believed in myself more, I'd show up more fully. So they look for motivation, they write things down, they try to feel ready. But the hiding doesn't come from not believing in yourself. It comes from believing in yourself just enough to know what's at stake. You know what you have, that's precisely why you protect it. The person who doesn't care what they're risking has nothing particular to risk. You're hiding the good stuff because some part of you has already assessed it as worth protecting, which means the shift isn't about confidence. It's about something closer to tolerance for exposure. Specifically, can you let something genuinely yours exist in a space where the response is uncertain? Can you say the real thing, show the real work, bring the actual version of yourself, and then just wait, without pre-softening it, without the disclaimer wrapped around it like packaging, without keeping one foot already out the door so the rejection can't fully reach you? That's the actual question, not do you believe in yourself, but can you stay in the room as yourself, without managing how yourself lands? For most people who do this, the answer right now is mostly no, and that's not a character flaw. It's a learned response, something that formed in a specific context, probably early, probably for a real reason. A time when showing the genuine thing got a response that taught you, maybe not. Maybe dial that down. Maybe that version of you is a bit much. And you listened, because you were paying attention, because you were trying to get it right. The problem is, the lesson generalized. It became a standing policy instead of a situational response. And now it runs automatically, in rooms where it was never needed, with people who might have actually wanted the real thing. A small note here, this video is meant for reflection and honest recognition, not as a substitute for professional support if you're working through something deeper. But if none of this has required professional support, if it's just a pattern you've been living inside without fully seeing it, then what changes first is usually not behavior. It's noticing, watching the moment the edit happens, catching the hesitation before it becomes a habit, seeing the disclaimer forming in your throat before you've decided whether it's actually needed, not forcing yourself to perform openness. Just pausing long enough to ask, is this protection still necessary here? Sometimes it is. The room genuinely isn't right. The person genuinely isn't safe. The timing genuinely isn't there. But sometimes, more often than the habit allows you to see, the answer is that it would probably have been fine. More than fine. The specific way you think, the particular thing you care about, the quiet depth you carry, those are not liabilities dressed up as strengths. They are not things to be managed and rationed. They are the part of you that makes your presence mean something to the right people. And those people cannot find that part of you while you're keeping it carefully out of reach. The hiding made sense once. It was smart, even. It kept something precious intact. But at some point, keeping something intact and keeping it invisible become two different things. And what you've been protecting, it was never meant to stay hidden this long.